Hi everyone, thank you for coming down on a Friday night to talk about wedding dresses. I've got a fantastic couple of women sat here with me to talk about wedding dresses, the history of bridal fashion and sort of the predicaments that face the modern bride. Sat here next to me is Virginia Bates. I'm sure you're all really familiar with Virginia. She's sort of really, really famous in the fashion community and beyond for sort of being a complete antique expert. You know, she ran Virginia's Antiques for a huge number of years and is your go-to woman for sort of antique fashion. And then I've also got Hannah Teare with me, former fashion director of Tatler. Hannah's got sort of over 15 years experience working in style and fashion. She consults now for luxury brands, she art directs, and she styles fashion shoots and campaigns. So a real all-rounder, complete style expert. Now to kick off, it was a simple question, but it's perhaps not an easy one. Who, in both of your opinions, is the most sort of iconic bride? Has there been a bride that's really sort of taken your breath away and you've thought, that's getting bridal fashion completely right?
Can I say?
Of course you can.
Obviously I would have to say my daughter, Daisy, and my daughter-in-law, both of which wore incredible dresses, unique. My daughter wore, obviously, an antique dress. It was sort of cobbled together from pieces from the shop. And the one that Sarah, my daughter-in-law, wore was probably the most extraordinary and original dress ever, which I had made. And it was a bustier top, and the skirt was just layers and layers and layers of little bias cut frills going all the way down, and then the train was probably from here to the door. But underneath each bias cut frill was a letter, a love letter, that I had found in the course of the 3 or 6 months that I knew when they were getting married. Neither the husband-to-be or Sarah knew, because when you looked at the dress, it was just the most incredibly romantic dress. But there were things like, what's your phone number? And then under, oh, fuck off. And then it was like the whole of their courting, and I had them printed on silk and picked out in gold. And then there were other little funny tokens, a little something that I have a tortoise, and the daughter-in-law-to-be was a tortoise freak, otherwise she wouldn't be in the family, obviously. And there were little tortoises and things, but that was kind of
very personal dress.
Very.
For me, yeah, it's between two. More if you just isolate the occasion, and also I was very small, but I think that Lady Diana's dress was just the ultimate, and the fairy tale proportion in when Cinderella went to the ball. I think that was, it was just larger than life, and all those bridesmaids. That was the first time that I ever remember seeing. So I think my parents had just got a colour TV set actually. So even the red carpet, all the bridesmaids, it was so excessive. And then on the other side, maybe Bianca Jagger. I think she was just, it was so sleek and chic and very kind of Halston, Studio 54. It was really, really beautiful. But funnily enough, when we think of what she wore, people think of that as being a tuxedo, a trouser suit, but it was actually a long, slim skirt, but it's always kind of portrayed as though that was the first time that somebody went that way. But I think there's such different examples. It would be really interesting to know what people in, I don't know, say Tutankhamun or someone like that, from those sort of, what they wore, those big queens, but we don't have that on record. So, but I think Bianca Jagger probably for the impact.
It's interesting that you say sort of Bianca Jagger and also Lady Diana, because my next question is sort of who's been, you think, a really influential bride. Obviously, you've both got sort of working in fashion, a bride who's changed sort of bridal wear and has sparked 1,000 copies and really has sort of, I don't know, maybe shifted a taboo about bridal wear or got women sort of approaching buying a wedding dress in a completely new way. No one wants to answer that.
I think probably Queen Victoria, for the fact that she wore white, and it wasn't actually before then an absolute dead cert that women wore white as a bridal gown, and that really then rolled out people automatically thinking that white was the colour, and she probably in that sense has the most impact. Yeah. And then Bianca, I guess, for then just do it the other way, sort of totally just.
That trend, didn't she, of everybody being totally different. Because up until then, it was, I mean, I think apart from my children, were, I think, Grace Kelly. For me, that was my first sort of big bridal experience. And again, we were allowed to watch it on television, but it was black and white. I was at school, and it was incredible, and all that lace, and then there was lace. Everybody had a long lace dress, didn't they? And then it all changed. And I think Bianca started the trend. And from my experience in the shop and selling many dresses to brides, they all want to be different. They don't want to have the normal wedding dress, but in actual fact, they probably do.
That's interesting you say that, because one of my next questions was sort of, obviously you've worked with so many brides coming into Virginia's Antiques and asking, what do they tend to come, what's the first thing they say when they come in?
The first thing they say is that they're going to get married, and my heart sinks. And then the next thing they say is they've come to me because they want to be different. And I immediately say, I don't sell wedding dresses. And they say, yeah, no, we know you don't, but you want to be different. And I know that in the end, they're going to say, oh, but haven't you got it in white or cream? Okay, so we've already established that they do actually want to look like a bride. And they will inevitably wear a long lace, Edwardian, slightly, a little bit, it'll have to be altered, because obviously the modern girl doesn't have the figure or the underwear, the corsetry that they did in the Edwardian and Victorian times. So it's impossible. They cannot get into those sort of little, and don't want to. Why should they? They're uncomfortable. They were hell to wear. But in the end, I guarantee the bottom line is that they want to look like the fairy tale bride, with the long veil, have the aura and the mystique of a bride. And they do not want to be different. And in the end, often they'll look around and they'll try, and then they might put something aside, and then the mother comes in, and then the sister comes in, and the friend comes in, and then there's the most almighty row, and then the father comes in, he doesn't want to pay for anything, and there's another almighty row, and then they go and buy it off the peg in somewhere else. So they are not my favourite people. Sorry.
Bit closer.
Okay, right.
It's actually, I've
got another mic, have you? Right. No, it's
all right. We can share. It's actually another question, just kind of bouncing off that one, is why do you think women want to wear antiques? Why do they want to come in and be in vintage? Is it because of the story? Is it because of,
I think it's the history and the fact that they're romantic. And I've always thought there's something about wearing an old, vintage, antique wedding dress that somebody else has worn. You kind of take on their excitement, their mystery, their day. And it is, without a doubt, whatever happens, it is the most important dress of your life, So fair enough, take some trouble. And it's, it's the package and all the drama that goes with this one purchase. But, why not?
It's interesting that you said as well that everyone wants to look different, because you must have really found this working in fashion, Hannah. It's quite an odd... It's quite an odd thing, the bridal market, because you see women who are incredibly stylish in their everyday life, and then when they get married, they seem to pick sort of the oddest dresses. Why do you think that weddings can send women sort of completely out of their style comfort zone and into very odd territory indeed? Yeah,
there's the bridezilla element that comes in. I think there's certainly the fairy tale, the idea of it being, some people think of the wedding as the beginning of the rest of their life with someone. Other people kind of don't even get beyond the wedding when they think about their wedding, and it's got to be the occasion. They want everything to be perfect. They envisage it in a certain way. And they've maybe looked at other, say, the Grace Kellys or the Lady Di's or the Bianca Jagger, and they have an idea of exactly what they want. And they kind of go for it, but they don't necessarily they sort of forget the fact that that maybe it's also important that they still look like themselves. Like the best brides that I've seen are people that still, they're kind of like a souped up, zhuzhed up, sparkly version of themselves that day, rather than someone that never wears their hair up and then suddenly they've got it piled up in curls on the top of their head and you don't even recognize them. Or people exercise like crazy and lose 2 dress sizes and then have the wedding and then stick it all back on again. I mean, people get really radical for their wedding days. They let go of the fact that they're, I don't know, a lawyer or someone who works at Tesco's and kind of go into this whole fantasy world. I mean, it's not always the case, but you see it regularly. And they will set aside a chunk of money, and it's almost like they want to spend it or they expect to spend it on that day. And actually, you could still look incredibly beautiful on something that you could spend a couple of £100 in rather than a couple of grand.
Talking of
tens of grands.
Yeah, that sort of amount of money, it leads me to a question about sort of the fashion market versus the bridal market, because, you know, high fashion, designer fashion is incredibly expensive, but from my perspective, I often feel like designers are really missing a trick there. You know, we see so many dresses for sale at sort of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, even more, but still there's a really sort of flourishing bridal market that's very separate, and most women, when they do get married, go to a wedding dress shop. You know, they're not looking to, you know, with Dolce & Gabbana or Simone Rocha or J.W. Anderson. Do you agree with that the fashion designers perhaps aren't realizing as much as they used to that the wedding dress is what they should be sort of aiming for to bring your average woman into their world and to get them sort of spending money?
The thing with fashion in general is it's always about embracing and then rejecting, and there's a discovery, there's a chrysalis, there's something, say it goes mini skirts and next season it's long, it's this or that, and it's all, you get this cycle. And I think perhaps for a phase and longer than as a quick cycle, it was considered a cliche for years. In the 80s, the final look on a ready-to-wear catwalk would have been a bridal dress. And that stopped for quite a long time. And actually, in the last few seasons, we've seen more often, and certainly at the couture shows, a bridal dress has come down at the end. And that, for me, is, I don't know, maybe it's just a bit of childlike glee, but it's actually really nice to see.
Why do you think we're seeing that again? Is that just a market thing? Is that designers cottoning on to the fact that, you know, that's a real sort of thriving market?
Well, you see the designers like Elie Saab, who are, they have huge bridal huge bridal sales, and he also has ready-to-wear, or someone like Vera Wang. Yes, maybe you could say there isn't the history of the house like Chanel or Dior, but he has an incredibly successful business, and ultimately, it's about the numbers, and the bridal industry is worth billions of dollars or pounds or whatever you want to say globally, and it's an important part of it. And a lot of the young designers are cottoning on to those sales, that element, yeah.
Yes. Give us your take. You're saying Alice Temperley there.
Alice Temperley, you know, her bridal department is phenomenal. You know, it's where the money is, the top money, big money. And if I was a designer, it'd be silly not to.
Do you agree, though, that there's been a slight taboo about wearing sort of high fashion on your wedding day, that women prefer to wear something that is specifically bridal?
I think so, because everybody wants to be unique, and they don't want to be walking down the aisle in, you know, following the bride in front that's got married an hour before is wearing the same goddamn dress. So, I mean, how frightful would that be? Rip it off her back.
Also, say if you're getting a high fashion piece, or even if it was ready to wear, but it's by the designer, your access to the designer, even if you were spending for 2 or 4 grand, you probably wouldn't have that time with the designer. But in a wedding shop, you often are able to do a little bit of a tweak or a bit of that. And I think there's something about that whole thing about how Virginia was saying that every bride wants to be, they end up being the same, but they also want to believe that they're being different. They want to change something. And I think if you're buying something off the peg, then you, in your mind, it feels as though someone else will also be wearing that dress. So.
They want it to be personalized. That's the thing. It's their dress. Even if there's 100,000, they still want their dress to be one of a kind, ever. And for them it is on the day. So it is all about the tweaking, and in the bridal shops, that's all laid on, isn't it?
What are the biggest changes that you've noticed? Just you said, you know, they all end up sort of relatively looking the same. What are the changes in those trends that you've noticed? Because I'm sure a bride of today wouldn't look the same.
Well, here's the trend.
Yeah.
Nearly a lot of the brides are pregnant, or they've just had a baby, but they still want to wear white, and that is pretty phenomenal, really, don't you think?
Why is the white wedding dress just not? Do you think that's ever going to go away? You know, we're seeing so many.
Will never go. It's classic. And I don't think it should go. I mean, I think it's fabulous. But, you know, we as, you know, women, we've all changed. You know, thank goodness. We don't have to wear those goddamn corsets anymore. We can be pregnant or whatever.
Also, because it has become known as the colour that the bride wears, except for maybe the odd guest that might turn up in white, it's kind of considered that is the bride's colour, and so you're going to stand apart whether you wear a short dress, a long dress, something that's quite understated and more sort of whether it was a bias cut simple dress or something much bigger. That kind of is the colour of the bride. So you hold the room when you're wearing white.
But it's interesting because you know, when you go upstairs in the exhibition, you see some of the sort of the younger dresses from sort of some of the modern women in there. For example, you know, Gwen Stefani in that wonderful pink dip-dyed John Galliano dress, or even, you know, Katie Shillingford in that amazing grey Gareth Pugh. It does suggest this kind of a slight fashion for being a bit more experimental in colour. Did you notice that, Virginia, with girls coming into the shop?
Yes, but that's designers designing bridal.
And those
do you know what I mean?
Fashion brides.
Yeah,
as well.
it's not normal people. It's not, on the whole, people promise you they want white. They want white or off-white. Later on, you know, for the older, the second or third marriage or whatever, they might be in chiffon, but pale flowers or whatever. But whatever age, I think women want to look like a bride. They really do. And why not, you know? I think it's right. It's correct.
And it's interesting, say, the dress that's in the exhibition, the amazing purple one that Dieter von Teese wore, it is actually, even within the curation, it's set separately because it doesn't really sit with everything else that is all sort of tonally, and sort of everything else flows very beautifully, and then you have this amazing purple dress, and it.
That's Dieter, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and she can do that, and somehow, even when people are on their second and third weddings, as Virginia was saying, the colours that people opt for are still ones that are very they're gentle, they're flattering. It's like the Duchess of Cornwall's outfit that's there as well. I mean, that's a beautiful option. She chose such. I mean, just something that was so befitting and elegant for the occasion and the stage of her life, and for the fact that it was going to be very, very visible, but needed to have sort of something that was pared down and graceful. It was lovely.
You know? It was going to be a tricky one, but she really pulled it off. I think it was magnificent.
Let's talk a little bit about the politics of being a sort of an older bride or getting married for the second or third time. How do we think that that's changed the bridal market? Because it does seem that sort of the bridal market, it still sort of fetishizes the young bride. You know, you go into a wedding dress shop or you pick up a wedding magazine and it is all like a large white gown. You know, we're not seeing so much of a market that caters to a slightly older bride or someone who doesn't want to wear white or doesn't want to wear a dress. What's the best way to be a second, to get married for a second or third time or even a fourth time?
I don't know, is whatever is the best for the woman, really. I think for my own experience, what I hear and when I know people that are getting married for the second time, it's normally a rejection of what they did the first time around. So if they had a wedding that was 120 people, they want 30 people. And so if it was a big dress, they want something that's much simpler. And it's often about the journey that the woman's taken and what feels right for them. And if they look like a sort of candy floss princess in the first one and they're now in a different phase of their life, there's probably something that's a little simpler.
And what was it about the Duchess of Cornwall that you felt was so sort of appropriate? Why did she get it so right?
There was still an element of fashion with the hat, the headpieces that she used, the Philip Tracy, the hat, and then the feathery one. They were so elegant. They were a nod to British fashion, and well, yeah, she looked classy, and she really, embraced an element of herself. I say prior to that, she hasn't always necessarily been in things that you would be talking about or noted on, and she stepped up to the occasion and she really delivered. It was just, you know, I salute her. She did a fantastic job.
Virginia, when people were coming into the shop, did you tend to get first-time brides, or were you getting older women, and what was the differences in what they were looking for?
Both. Usually the second marriage was chiffon, a printed chiffon dress. Or the other thing that I think is interesting that has changed is that there is no longer one dress. There will be guaranteed 2, maybe 3, whereas in the old days there was the dress and then the going away outfit, and it all happened on the same day.
And what have you noticed has changed as women want to...
First of all, it just seems to go on for days, and there isn't the going away outfit. The bride seems to stay, and bridegroom, until the very end, and everybody goes home, job done. Whereas in the old days, you got married and you had the cake and champagne, and then you all went outside and you waved goodbye to the bride and groom, and then you had the biggest piss up of all time, and job done. But now it seems that you get married, you do the church, and then you have a quick change, and you all go back and you sit down and have the lunch and the dinner, and the bride is wearing something completely different, but bridal, like in like a gold lame or whatever, and then we'll change again for the dancing. So that is what I saw a lot of.
Do you think that's a desire to show off personality? You know, they think perhaps if I wear one gown for the actual ceremony, then I can show my sort of fashion sense.
I think it's because they couldn't make up their mind, actually.
But you even had that with Kate Middleton's wedding this time. You know, you had this epic, beautiful, romantic dress that, because it kind of spanned eras with its references, but was also modern and British. And then in the evening, it was long still. It was more of a sort of gala red carpet dress, but that was definitely the party dress. I mean, she wouldn't have been able to dance in the dress of the day. And so even on the royal occasion, then they're embracing that those different chapters within the wedding.
It's so fitting, obviously, that you bring up Kate Middleton, because you can't really talk about wedding dresses without talking about that dress. Were you both really happy that she picked the House of Alexander McQueen?
I was, yeah. I just saw it, embracing that modern British designer, but one that has that ferocity. But I mean, underpinning the history and his learning was the tailoring, and he loved British history, and he the way that he approached, the way that he designed, there was so much elegance and drama, but also the pieces were just exquisite. So it was a really wonderful thing, and Sarah, who's now taken over at the helm, she feminizes his ferocity so beautifully as well, and I think it was a really perfect choice.
What was your take on it, Virginia?
No, I agree, perfect.
Yeah.
So romantic, and it fitted her beautifully. I mean, she is beautiful, but it showed, it wasn't overly sexy, which is another thing I'm always a bit against, you know, the bride putting it all out. And I think there should be an element of modesty and a bit of purity, especially for a royal. It's a hard act, isn't it? But she looked devastating. I mean, it was breathtaking.
And what eras did you see in that dress? What eras did you see reflected? What historical?
I saw a bit of everything. I saw the Edwardian. I saw the Victorian. I saw very modern. I loved the fabrics. I just think it was sensational.
And what do you think the impact of that gown has been, both on fashion but also on the bridal market? Because I think, you know, it's real popular interest in McQueen has come up on a fashion level, and I think it's also had a big impact on bridal.
I think it brought if there was any chance that everybody was sort of trying to get away from the wedding cake meringue look. I'm not saying that her dress was a meringue, but it brought back the long, the train, the romance back into wedding dresses, whereas I think there was a trend, which is why people started coming to me, they were wanting to be different. They didn't want the train, they didn't want that kind of drama. But, you know, the bottom line is that it's romantic, and that in the end, that's what everybody wants.
So you've really noticed a desire to kind of have a bit of a showstopper dress after that?
Yeah.
And why do you think women were heading in the opposite direction before? Why did you think they wanted something, you know, perhaps without a train?
To be different and to be
perhaps
original.
modern.
Yeah. Although, as I say, they were buying from me antique pieces, sort of bias cut 30s or Edwardian dresses. They still, you know, want to be romantic.
What was your take on sort of the influence that dress had? Did you see it a lot working as a fashion commentator, working as a stylist? Did you really see that dress sort of filter down?
I think certainly lace was already quite a big thing happening, but it's definitely the lace over something tailored, so that it almost lace has come through and come into work. You can have it on a shirt now, maybe just as a panel of a collar or a cuff, and it is feminine. You can go to a business meeting and there's a certain amount of feminizing of say the office, and I mean I couldn't say whether there was a direct effect in that sense, but her combination of the lace with the extreme structure and the amazing volume and everything was wonderful, and I think it was really time for there to be something super romantic for everyone to enjoy and talk about.
And it's interesting that we're spending so much time talking about a royal dress, because obviously you must have found this as well working at a title like Tatler. Do you think that women do get their dress inspiration if they are getting married? Do they get it from society brides, royal brides, or do you think that actually a bit too much is made of that in the press, and actually most women, they tend to pick a dress based on body shape or based on what their family has worn, or even just based on their personal style? What's influencing brides?
I think that, again, that really depends on the woman, but you can't not be impacted by those big royal weddings. Although, I mean, it's not. We didn't really see the one that happened in Monaco, that Charlene's so much, but that was certainly Kate Middleton. For some reason, there is something about Kate Middleton's that also, funnily enough, there are elements of it that were also Grace Kelly had, sort of the lace overlay. So it was demure, but sort of a little bit sexy, but not really. And I think that combination of wanting to be very feminine and alluring, it's things moving that way rather than being totally innocent, I think, and that the sort of combination is something that people like to have. I mean, when I was sort of in the early, say, noughties, there were an awful lot of column dresses and strapless. People were really embracing that as something that was a modern bride at the time, and now we've moved away from that again, and it was as though people were trying to wear a party dress that when they just added a couple of foot to the end of it and then stuck a veil on and went down. There were so many weddings that were like that, and now the big dresses that we've seen in the last few years have been so much more feminine, and that's absolutely where the market's gone.
Do you think we are going to see that changing now, particularly with the number of women getting married in sort of registry offices or opting for several ceremonies? Do you think that women are going to go back in the opposite direction, where they actually don't want to wear a dress, they want to be a bit more sort of modern, a bit more discreet? Or do you think that we'll always... You're kind of standing by the white dress, aren't you?
I'm going with the frock, honestly. Yeah. I don't think that'll ever go away. I mean, in the end, I think the bottom line is the money. But if a girl or woman can afford to have a long, fabulous dress and a train, that's what she wants, and that will never go. That will never go, trust me.
Talking of the money, let's talk about the rise of the high street bride, because we're seeing that a lot. You know, really recently we saw Richard Nicholl do a great collaboration with Topshop on bridal wear. You know, there's a bit of debate, should you get your dress, you know, fitted, or is it fine to get a dress off the peg, or even from the high street?
I think that's fine. I really do. You know, if you can't afford the big one, then obviously get the off the peg. And I'm sure the girl in her heart, or the mother or the father, you know, would want to spend more money. But if you haven't got it, you haven't got it. And you know, at least it's available. I think it's fantastic.
What are your big bridal no-nos then?
Let me think now. There's a few. My big bridal no-nos. I think the underwear and all that is kind of quite important. I've had brides coming to me and wanting a bias cut 30s dress. And frankly, unless you've got a figure like Kate Moss, it's a really one to pull off, unless you wear no knickers. And honestly, on your wedding day, you should wear your knickers. Really? That would be, you know, that was always the one, that problem that I used to think, oh God, I have to say, oh no, I can't. Should I? It's about the underwear. This girl should not be wearing a 30s bias cut dress because they show all the lumps and the bumps. There are ways round. Spanks. Spanks, girls. No knickers, Spanks.
Any other things that you would like to see sort of, you know, fade away? Whether it's, would you rather see more brides in hats rather than veils, flat shoes?
I love a veil. I don't think there should be any rules. I think it's the girl's day, and she, in the end, she should do what she likes. You know, I don't mind ridiculous. I love the gypsy woman. I love the gypsy wedding. I think that's completely fabulous. And if I ever get married again, that's what I'd wear. I really would.
Hannah, how about you? What are your huge bridal no-nos or trends that you'd like to go away, or fashions that you'd like to sort of disappear in bridal wear?
Yeah, I feel like it's similar to Virginia in the sense that there shouldn't be any rules, but that does feel like I'm dodging. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the big curl up on the top of the head. I really like the brides to still feel like the woman that either I know them as, or how we know them if there's someone in the press. It's nice to see them in an elevated version of themselves, really, rather than sort of taking on a whole new character. So that for me would be it. I've also thought, when I was little, I really used to love those frilly blue garters. I just thought they were divine, but now when I think, they just feel a little bit Ann Summers nowadays. I don't know. Unless you had a really, really beautiful one. Maybe Mila, they probably do one, but yeah.
I do garters. I do garters. But mine are the best. Okay, 1920s garter, right? Pink with lame and a little pocket with a little powder puff. And on this leg, the other leg, it has a little mirror. Isn't that fantastic? Yeah, that's really fantastic. Really sweet. So she's there quickly.
Doesn't need a handbag then?
No, but that I think is fabulous.
Is that one of your favourite eras for bridal wear, the 20s? Do you have an era that you would always direct brides to?
I love the headdress and the long, floaty, ethereal train, and, you know, the headdress, veil. I love that about the Edwardian 20s. I love the bias cut. But then I love, yeah, that probably is my favourite, and the 20s. But also can be a bit awkward because it's a very unflattering unless you're like a pin, no bust, no hips. But if you've got a shape, the 1920s is appalling to wear. But I think the veil and the sort of the classic, I would like, I suppose in a way, maybe a little more modesty on the wedding day. But you know, no rules.
I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but I was wondering actually if you could give us a brief sort of history lesson with bride. You know, what were the fashions for each decade? Very simple. I don't want to put you too much on the spot. A brief history lesson of kind of each decade, what was really fashionable for the brides. If you just talk us through changes, because you must see so many fabulous antique gowns.
Well, I suppose pre-Victorian, it's very modest. It's covered, and you know, Victorian, you're waisted, and the wedding dress is all about that. But in a way, the most exciting thing about the Victorian wedding dress was the underwear and the layers, because often I had Victorian wedding dresses, but they were frumpy, heavy silk, frankly unwearable, but the petticoat underneath was to die for. You know, fine lawn and lace and pin tucks and ribbons and little buttons, and then underneath that there'd be a chemise, and underneath that would be a corset, and then a camisole. I mean, how exciting was that for the guy, you know? And I think that's pretty cool. And then we go to the Edwardian, and it's, you know, a little bit more relaxed. The corsetry isn't quite so structured. And then the 20s, she's dumped the corset. She's got the big baggy drawers. And then the 30s, it's, you know, a little bit well, it's very sexy and bias and revealing. And then so on. And then the 40s, tailored and structured, and the 50s more so, and then the 60s and so on.
What's the point that you think we really get sort of the establishment of the modern bride? Does that start perhaps even just with celebrity culture? You know, we're seeing so many more brides in the press than we were, you know, sort of...
Yeah, I guess. And I think in a way it all started with Grace Kelly's wedding, you know, suddenly, and television and press, and my God's sake, Hello magazine, you know?
Do you agree with that, Hannah, that you think Hello magazine's probably changed bridal wear for greatly, just having so much more press around weddings and different brides?
I think it definitely sells the day. I don't know where, and the idea of the life that these people have. But I think we've all seen so many of those now, and also the disintegration of so many of those weddings that you've seen in the Hello. That it is kind of it's a fascinating format. The way that people, I think, construct those occasions, even though they are a wedding, but it's more than that because a certain amount is done for that publication as well, to make it and sort of, I guess that has driven people to, I don't know, want carriages and other sorts of elements so that they get to make their day perfect. It's sold things a different way because there's so much information now. And there's so much media coverage, so there are no secrets anymore. Yeah.
You say it's a shame. Why do you say that?
I just think, you know, there's a lot to be said for mystery and holding back. And I mean, I've, you know, they always say, don't they, if your wedding has been featured in Hello magazine, it's the kiss of death. That's it. Job done. Over. You know, get the next dress in.
So your kind of favourite bride is the discreet bride, isn't it? I'm getting that sense.
Definitely, yeah.
So talk me through the best bridal outfit in your view. If you could style a bride now, what would you put her in?
I think Kate Moss's dress was...
Which is upstairs.
Which is upstairs, I think was phenomenal, that John Galliano designed. I think it was so beautiful. It was a fairy princess dress, and the long, floaty train, and, you know, the headdress and the orange blossom. And I'd like to see, you know, imagine, I'm sure it wasn't true, but her floating through the forest with her husband. But hey, you know, she's probably trashed behind a bale somewhere. I hope that too, actually.
So that would be your advice to the modern bride: discreet, slightly vintage, slightly antique. How about you, Hannah? What's your... I want to go to questions, but before, what's your piece of advice? Where would you direct a modern bride, whether it's to a certain shop or a certain style?
I think I'd remind them that they're going to be looking at these pictures in years to come. And, and I mean, I think that nowadays in modern fashion, to say outside of a bridal market, there's sort of trends on every level. Each season isn't dictated by one thing or another. So it's really very much what she likes and what suits her. Look at your body shape, look at what the occasion is or how you want it to be, and what feels right. But and yeah, maybe don't go for cartoon proportions. But aside from that, is also, when I'm styling an individual, I start with the person and also what their favorite things are or what they're most happiest in, and then you can kind of work from there as well, and then just kind of, say, glamorize it or take it up quite a few notches into that sort of next phase.
So do you think that it is most important that a bride starts with the kind of the silhouette that suits her usually and builds on that? Or is it better that she considers, you know, what kind of a colour or a texture she wants to wear? Is it fit that needs to be right, would you both say?
I personally would say that the fit is kind of key, whether you want it to be something that is body skimming or corseted, with a corset you can create a body shape as well, so it doesn't have to be absolutely suited, say, in that sense, but what feels right for the occasion. You don't want them to feel restricted.
The other thing, I think, especially if you're getting married in a church, the back is really important. And brides often forget that because most of the pictures are the back. And there's, you know, you're a long time being stared at. Everybody's watching your back. And I think people forget that. You know, you can't hide, it's there.
Very good
That's
tip.
another reason why Kate's was so beautiful, her dress, with the train and...
Are there any questions from anyone? We've stunned everyone into silence.
Don't be shy. Hold it like that.
Thanks. One of the aspects of the show upstairs I found most moving was when, in different economic times, women would do things like make their own dresses and have it be a dress that they could then wear later on in the pre-Victorian period, and then also during the war making use of upholstery fabric because it wasn't rationed. What kinds of things? I mean, obviously, we're living through an economic downturn. How do you see women responding to that in their choice of dresses?
Well, in a way, I always thought selling my antique clothes was kind of like recycling. And, you know, one of the reasons, apart from wanting to be different, that people would come to me, women would come to me, was because it was a lot cheaper than going somewhere else. Or they might come in with their grandmother's dress, which was unwearable because it was full of stains or whatever, but they'd like the top or the sleeve or whatever, and we'd kind of cobble something together. And I love that. And I love the idea of, you know, in the time when, you know, during and after the war, when there was rationing and that there was nothing available, that, you know, they made the wedding dress out of the nylon curtains. I think that's fantastic. And, you know, there were great dressmakers around. And I think the sad thing is now that that is not available. People are lazy. They don't sit down and get out the sewing machine and figure out another way. They'll just go down to the high street. I think it's a shame.
I think because we do have this disposable fashion, what you are seeing is maybe these brides will keep their dresses, but those prices that are reflected in, say, the wedding dresses in Monsoon or Matthew Williamson for Debenhams and things like that, those are pretty dresses. I mean, sure, the quality of the fabric and things like that isn't necessarily what you'd be getting from a bridal shop, but you are getting them at a tenth of the price. And for some people, they are going to wear those dresses only once. They will either want to preserve them for forever, or they just consider that their wedding dress and they won't ever wear it again. Or a lot of people have their wedding dresses and believe they're going to wear them again, and then they don't. Or I've been a bridesmaid several times, and the amount of times that I've heard people say, well, it's a nice dress, you know, you'll wear it again, won't you? And you're like, yeah. And I don't think I ever have actually reworn a bridesmaid's dress. But on the flip side of, say, being able to get the much cheaper dresses from the high street, even though there has been a massive recession on it, I think people will still spend on weddings. They will still spend a lot of money on their wedding and their wedding dress, irrespective of what's going on financially for sort of in the economic climate. It's one of those few occasions where people really thump a lot of money on it if they've got it, and even if they haven't, they consider it special enough that they want to sort of move the money towards that occasion and probably be more thrifty somewhere else.
Any more questions?
I was going to ask if you think that we're ever going to see a return to the days where women are sort of wanting to make their own dress or design their own dress. How often were you seeing that, where women had sketched something out and they came in wanting you to sort of piece something together for them?
Oh, definitely. 'Cause that's what I would see all the time. They'd come in with something they'd ripped out of a magazine, or they want to look like so-and-so in a movie. Have you got anything like that? And I'd go, no. And then we'd build on, or maybe I might. But it's kind of like team effort. I quite like that. I like the challenge. I always ride to a problem.
I have a good friend who's getting married in July, and actually she's decided to not spend money on the dress and put money in other places for the occasion. And her aunt has actually given her dress, and she's adjusting it. She's just changing it, taking the neckline down. And she's always loved vintage pieces and antiques, and for her, that's almost part of her personality as well. And there are people that still love traditional methods, or just there's a certain nostalgia and a romance to looking back or recycling. And I mean, it's a very small part of our culture now on some levels, but I think that will continue. And it would be lovely if we saw more of it, actually, because it's really gorgeous when somebody wears a wedding dress that's been part of their family, and it suits them as well. And you see it, and the magic that creates within the family as well when something's being used again. It's really lovely.
I'm a bridal shoe designer, and I just wanted to ask if you see any trends with bridal shoes. I know that it's usually always about the dress, but I always go from the ground up, so.
Well, my advice is always to the bride, you have to wear something comfortable because it's one hell of a long day. And often the girl will buy the shoes and she won't wear them until the day, which I think is a tragic mistake. So my advice would always be break the shoes in first. You know, even if you're just wearing them around the house, not too high. And honestly, it's about the comfort at the end of the day, because most of the time you hardly see the shoe. Forgive me, but you know, the front is the most important, but comfort.
I think that advice is brilliant about wearing it, and just not for them not to be too high. Absolutely. Though some of my friends have gone more for like a really pale blue, because that can be their something blue moment, or say a blue sole or a blue inside. Or that has maybe been the one part that they will consider wearing again, whether it's because it's a jeweled slipper or they've got them from Prada or from Manolo, where it's definitely as a last or a shape that they believe that they can wear in another thing, and that is definitely part of the outfit that can be reused.
I just wanted to ask about colour, because I got married in green, and my boss said, oh, it's such bad luck to get married in green on your wedding day, but I just threw caution to the wind. So what are your feelings about colours? You know, can you get married in black, multicolours?
You can get married in whatever you like. You're the boss. On that day, you call all the shots, right? Really, truly. You know, it's down to the individual. So get married in green, girl. Go for it.
I think absolutely the same. Do whatever you want to do. And I love colour, but maybe it would have been... you might have got frightened if you'd given it too many thoughts or gone into... If someone had said too early to you, green isn't good, you know, like I think that actresses never wear green on stage, or they don't wear emeralds, or they, you know, if you go into there's colours for, I think purple isn't good in China, and there's all sorts of different things. So there are so many attachments in different cultures to colours and things. And I think that white was also a colour of mourning, or it is certainly in India. And so, I mean, you could really go into that, and then you would just turn up naked, or not, obviously. But so it doesn't, wear whatever you would like. But one of the things about the white colour is, I think, that you hold the room, and it depends how you want to hold the room on those days.
Are there any superstitions, though, that shouldn't be broken? You know, we're quite open-minded with colour, it seems, but there are any things that we think, yeah, actually, no, that's too far, things that women have to sort of abide by when they get married?
I don't want to see a really, really deep cleavage myself, because I think that can be distracting for everybody, not just hot-blooded males or, you know, things like that. It's like you want to be thinking beyond and around the occasion, as opposed to thinking, bloody hell, she's got big knockers.
How about you, Virginia? Do you think no rules?
I think no rules, but you know, it's common sense, really. I mean, if you've got knockers like that, honestly, you know, the best man is just going to, that's it, John. Trouble. You're just asking for trouble. Fight before the day's over.
So that's our takeaway then, no rules, but no cleavage.
Well, not too much. She says completely flat-chested.
Well, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Thank you. And thank you for such brilliant questions.
Thank you.